Hey guys, this video is all about the bill that was introduced by Tom Sullivan, the semi-automatic firearms and rapid fire devices ban, basically is what it is. SB 25003. Stay tuned. Okay, first of all, I'm by the fire because it's cold AF outside. And yeah, so I decided to come down here because my office is super cold. Besides, it gives it a little nice ambience, doesn't it? Anyway, so the Tom Sullivan introduced this bill for this legislative season, SB 25003, and I'm just going to go over the first paragraph here. Okay, this bill defines a specified semi-automatic firearm as a semi-automatic rifle or semi-automatic shotgun with a detachable box magazine. They don't have box in there. I just put that in there. Or a gas-operated semi-automatic handgun with a detachable magazine. This bill prohibits knowingly manufacturing, distributing, transferring, selling, or purchasing a specified semi-automatic firearm, except that a person may transfer a specified semi-automatic firearm to an heir, an individual residing in another state, or an FFL. Okay? Wow. So basically, they want to stop the manufacture, sale, and transfers of the most common firearms that we have in the United States or the world. Period. Right. So that AR-15, your Glock pistol, they define this stuff later on in the bill, but at the end of the day, they want to ban all semi-automatic firearms, and they don't say it's a ban. They say you can possess these things, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So, who is Tom Sullivan exactly? Well, unfortunately, he he is the father of the slain individual. His son named Alex. Alex was 27. He was slain in the Aurora Theater, and he's still grieving. He's still grieving with the death of his son, and he wears a jacket every day to remind everyone why he's doing what he's doing, which kind of gives you an idea of why this bill is so, um, I want to say tyrannical, for lack of a better term, but basically it's so overreaching because of his pain that he feels. And, you know, to his credit, he's trying to do something about the violence problem we have in Colorado, but it's not going to work. Unfortunately, he's letting his emotions get the best of him, and the only thing I have to say to Mr. Sullivan is, like, I'm sorry for the death of your son, but people die every day. Every single day, people die. Sons die, mothers die, fathers die, grandmothers, so on and so forth. It's been a long time since your son Alex died. Don't let your emotions get the best of you on this. Okay, so That's my advice to Mr. Sullivan. I'm sure he's a good man, and he means well, but this bill is not going to stop any kind of gun violence. It's just not going to. So here he is. This is who he defines himself. I'm the parent of a murdered child. That's who I am. So again, like he's so fixated on his son dying, and it's unfortunate. And the thing about it is, what's really unfortunate is that he's going to use those heartstrings of everyone else to get this thing passed. A lot of people might think I'm cruel by saying, hey, your son died some time ago. It's time to move on with your life, kind of a thing. And maybe I am a little bit cruel, but at the end of the day, if my son died, let's say today, 10, 20 years later down the road, I'm not going to still be grieving, right? I want to accept the fact that he died, regardless of how he died, whether it's in a car accident, a gunshot, whether he drowns, whether it's natural causes, whatever. My son, it would be dead. You see what I'm saying? So it wouldn't matter exactly how he died. It's just he's gone. So maybe I am a little bit cruel, but at the end of the day, it's been quite some time. So as you can see here, he also led the passage of red flag gun bills. I can't remember what year this is that he led that, but at the end of the day, he is on a war path. However, what's interesting is that he actually kind of was instrumental in stopping the assault weapons ban of last year, which, that's Tom Sullivan. Now we're going to talk about the similarities between vehicle deaths and accidents to firearm deaths and accidents, okay? Let's go ahead and put this out there. Driving is a privilege. I am 100% for restricting people's driver's license significantly if they get caught doing reckless behavior stuff. You see it all the time on the 25. You see it all the time in Denver. I don't believe that we are strict enough with these drivers in Colorado. I think we could probably really put the hammer to them because you kind of need a vehicle to travel, for work, for pleasure, for whatever. There are laws that we can use or at least make and then enforce those laws so that reckless drivers are taken off of the road and put in prison. I don't care. Like, it's ridiculous the amount of reckless driving that I see on a day-to-day basis versus firearms. Firearms are protected under the Second Amendment. We know that to be true, okay? The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. We've all heard that. We understand that is and should be an absolute, okay? There are certain things that probably we should look at to maybe disarm somebody who's dangerous to the public. But then again, who makes that decision? Unfortunately, Colorado thinks a lot of people can petition the court to make that happen, to include obviously spouses, ex-spouses, people you live with, a law enforcement officer, a medical examiner. Like, there's just a lot of people who can actually petition the court for an extreme risk protection order. Let's start with deaths by firearm in the state of Colorado, okay? Because look, we're gonna compare deaths to deaths, injuries to injuries. In my point of view, and probably should be most people's point of view, a death is a death. It doesn't matter if they're shot by a pistol, let's say, or if they, crash head on and die that way or something of that nature. In fact, just down the road here, a lady was killed, and I don't know what the circumstances were, but she was killed because she was riding a motorcycle. She just got the motorcycle for her birthday, and she got hit by a vehicle, by a car, and died. Does her family, do they care how she died? No, they care that she died. They care that she died and that she's gone and that they'll never be able to see her again or talk to her or any of those things. So a death is a death is a death. So we're going to compare deaths to deaths, injuries to injuries. Now, here is a fact sheet, and this is from Colorado.gov. Okay, so I'm getting my sources from places that would be considered reputable. Okay, this is the firearm deaths in Colorado from 2016 to 2021. Okay, now let's look at this real quick. Okay, so there has been a pretty steady increase. There's like a little drop there in 2017, not much of one, but typically 800s, 900, and then we actually went to 1,000 on that one. But that's also probably because our population has grown. Our population growing, like who knows who's coming into the state, especially within the last 4 years. So that number is likely to go up. We've seen the Aurora stuff happen up there with the Tren de Agua gang, okay? And people tried to suppress that news story. They tried to say, it wasn't gang related, so on and so forth. Well, now come to find out, yes, it is gang related. So our deaths by firearm will likely go up for the year of 2024, since we're in 2025 now. Okay, for 2022, I'm getting this from the CDC. You can see there. Okay, so I'm gonna just click on there. It says for 2022, there are 1,036 deaths by firearm. Okay, now if we go back to 2021, right here, 1,059. Similar. Okay, then we're gonna go. This is from vpc.org, Violence Policy Center.org. This is November 2024. You can see there. And we're going to compare this a little bit. Right here. 2022. Gun deaths exceeded motor vehicle deaths in 35 states and the District of Columbia. We're going to look at Colorado. Okay. 1,036 compared to 846. So what this doesn't tell you is how many injuries happen with vehicles in the state of Colorado. So we're sticking with the state of Colorado. We're sticking with 2022. And now we're going to go to injuries for vehicles, okay? So remember, there's 846 deaths according to vpc.org. Then we go to .gov, or Department of Transportation.gov for 2022. You can see it right there. Okay, and they're saying number of fatalities is actually 764. So there's some irregularities there. But let's go down here to injuries, because I think it's important to know that in 2022, there was 3,705 serious injuries when it comes to vehicular accidents. So if we just say, okay, right around 800 people died from a vehicle and 3,700 people were injured, you could deduce that 4,500 people were either injured or killed in the year of 2022 with a vehicle. You could also safely assume that all 4,500 people that were injured or killed didn't want to be injured or killed. Anti-gunners always want to bring up suicide when it comes to death by firearm, because the vast majority of death by firearm is suicide. So that wouldn't say there was a gun problem. That says there's a mental health problem. And I know that's a slippery slope as well, but at the end of the day, it probably is a mental health problem, especially when you look at mass shootings. If you go to the violenceproject.org, they'll show you that most, if not all, almost all of the mass shooters had some kind of suicidal tendency. There's a mental health issue going on somewhere in there in the gun violence arena. So it's not the gun. So that's why I say this law, or this bill, that Mr. Sullivan has introduced does nothing to combat the problem. It does zero to combat the problem. Okay, so I scoured the internet for, unintentional injuries when it comes to firearms. So what I could find is this Johns Hopkins article, Firearm Violence in the United States. Now I just want to show you guys a chart real quick. Okay, I'll blow this up. Okay, so in 2022, you can see up there at the top here, there's 48,000 lives were lost to gun violence. Okay. Now this is called this is lives, and I get it. We're talking about life or death here. Okay. There are some times where, an accident happens, somebody shoots themselves in the foot at the range or something like that. But this kind of gives you an idea of how many injuries there could have been when it comes to firearms, because we want to compare deaths by firearms and vehicles and injuries by firearms and vehicles. Okay, so unintentional, we can see right here, 463 unintentional injuries that caused deaths. Okay, right here, legal intervention, we're looking at 643. Okay, and this is nationwide, by the way, so I couldn't find anything on Colorado when it comes to just getting injured by a firearm. If you guys can find something and send it to me, that'd be awesome. And then we have undetermined, right? So for me, when I look at the data, since this is for the nation, this one particular graph here is for the nation, we're looking at 463 unintended firearm injuries. If we divide that by 50, let's say, well, you can go ahead and do the math there. It's not very much. The injuries and deaths from vehicular accidents dwarf the injuries and deaths from firearms, period. And that is to include the suicides from firearms, which is a lot more, a whole lot more than homicides. And then again, if you're involved in a crash, you're not likely wanting to commit suicide with a vehicle. That doesn't make any sense. So that is a distinction I think should be well known. Okay, what about the environmental impact of having a vehicle? Okay, now I have to say, I'm not saying we should get rid of vehicles. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that if we're going to look at deaths in this country and how many deaths and the environmental impact and the financial impact and all these other things, if we're going to look at these things and we're going to compare them, well, then let's compare them. Now, I couldn't find any data of 2022 for environmental impact when it comes to vehicles. But somebody with half a brain could already go ahead and say that vehicles have a lot more environmental impact than firearms. So let's say a vehicle, it's got tires, so there's rubber, so road grime. Then there's oil. Not only is there oil, there's transmission fluid, and there's gas, and there's all these other things, right? And in order to fill up your gas tank, you have to go to a gas station, which there's leaks there. The environmental impact with vehicles, it outweighs the environmental impact when it comes to firearms. That's without even doing any research. You can already say that's true. Now, with a firearm, let's say, okay, well, you have to have manufacturing. So there's some manufacturing environmental impact there. There's lead, obviously. You have to make this powder, of course, right? So that could be a dangerous thing. making powder. There are some environmental impacts when it comes to firearms manufacturing, shooting them, training, all these other things. Lead's probably the biggest concern there, but there's no rubber, road grime, oil, stuff like that that is going to end up in our water system most likely. And it's a highly controlled environment when you go to the range. In fact, the ranges have to do a lead cleaning of their range every so often. So there's all kinds of environmental factors when it comes to the vehicle part of this, and not so many as it comes to the firearms part of this. So here's an executive summary of the environmental impact when we're talking about this, and I'm getting this from the Department of Transportation. Okay, so in 2019, the total economic cost of motor vehicle crashes in the United States was $340 billion. Now remember, this is 2019. Okay, this represents the present value of lifetime economic costs for 36,500 fatalities, 4.5 million non-fatal injuries, and 23 million damaged vehicles. We're in the millions here, guys. In the millions, nationally, in the millions. We don't even come close to a million when it comes to firearm deaths and injuries. Okay, so as you guys know, we in the United States, we the people, have a Second Amendment. And that Second Amendment, I don't want to screw it up because sometimes I do screw it up, but so I'm going to read it verbatim. What I'm about to talk about for the remainder of this absolutely pertains to the Second Amendment, both state and federal. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, when they're saying state in this, they don't mean like a state. They mean just a body, right? So the body of the people at that time, which then, transpired to today, okay? That don't mean actually like the state of Colorado or state of California or something like that. The nation, state, nation, those are interchangeable when it comes to the Second Amendment. So there's Supreme Court precedents dating back all the way until 1876, okay? So there's some things in here that, I kind of disagree with, but they're in there. So we have to talk about those a little bit. I'm a Second Amendment advocate, so I'm going to really hammer on the things that I do agree with, of course. 1876, basically the Second Amendment declares that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, but this means no more than that the right shall not be infringed by Congress. Okay, so they're saying that the right can't be infringed by Congress, and this is 76. I'm not super boned up on history. Obviously, I don't think that we had a full United States at that point in time. I think it was, we didn't have 50 states at least. So things have changed since then. 1886, right here, this one. In view of the fact that all citizens capable of bearing arms constitute the reserved military force of the national government. They're just saying that right there, right out loud. People who can keep and bear arms are the reserve military force of the United States. That's pretty clear. That's pretty clear right there. So I'm going to continue. The states cannot prohibit the people from keeping and bearing arms so as to deprive the United States of their rightful resource for maintaining the public security. We're talking about a militia here, is what we're talking about. The militia is the public security, okay? So, yes, things have changed. I know we have a military and a National Guard. I'll get in that in a minute. But the militia is separate from those entities. Okay, so Miller versus U.S. versus Miller in 1939. Basically they're saying, hey, you can ban shotguns, for example, short-barreled shotguns. I don't agree with that, but in the grand scheme of things, like, I don't really care about the shotgun all that much. I do think you should be able to have a short-barreled shotgun just as much as a short-barreled rifle or any other firearm, but the shotgun is not something that I'm willing to die on. That's not the hill I'm willing to die on. Okay, and then we're looking at 1980 U.S. versus Lewis, or Lewis versus U.S. Congress can rationally conclude that any felony conviction is sufficient to strip them of their right. There's some litigation going on right now for nonviolent felons. If you're a nonviolent felon, I don't think it's right that you get your Second Amendment right taken away from you. I don't think that's right at all. Okay, so here is where it gets spicy. Okay, so DC versus Heller. The Second Amendment protects an individual's right to possess a firearm unconnected with service in a militia. I want you to hear that again. It's unconnected with service with a militia. Completely unconnected in that regard, okay? And to use that firearm or that arm for traditionally lawful purposes. Now, this is where the anti-gunners like to hone in on, right? They zero in on this, such as self-defense within the home. Now, I read that, and it's just an example of what a lawful purpose would be. Anti-gunners wanted to argue that this such as self-defense within the home, is saying that you could have a firearm within the home, but not outside of it, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Okay, so that is an example of a lawful purpose. McDonald versus Chicago. Okay, they're saying that the 14th Amendment incorporates the Second Amendment for the purpose of self-defense, meaning the right is protected from state and federal, right? So states such as Colorado, Illinois, California, New York, all these states that are infringing, they are doing unlawful things. Okay, Catano versus Massachusetts. The Second Amendment extends to all instruments that constitute bearable arms. So, I mean, I don't know what the definition is of a bearable arm, but I do know that, a firearm, obviously, that firearm I can bear, I can hold and move around with. A pistol, of course, a knife, right? Body armor is also, I think, in that category. So anything that's a bearable arm is protected. The New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. This one was great because basically this is saying all laws have to go back, and the government has the burden of proof to show that they are consistent with this nation's history and text. So this is what is awesome about Bruin, but the problem is that some states don't care. They don't give a shit about it, and that just shows you that they don't really care about the rule of law. They're just going to do whatever they want, when they want, and how they want. Unfortunately, the bump stock case, like I really don't care about that one. Bump stocks, I think, are stupid, but they definitely were not making it a machine gun, and that was codified in the Garland versus Cargill case. And then we have the Rahimi case. Okay, so an individual found by the court to pose a credible threat to the physical safety of another person may be temporarily disarmed, consistent with the Second Amendment. Okay, temporarily, not permanently. Okay, so when we talk about those nonviolent felons, yeah, maybe they can be temporarily disarmed, but it shouldn't be a permanent punishment. So that is the Supreme Court precedents that I wanted to talk about specifically. Also in Heller, they also say that you cannot ban the firearms that are in common use. That AR-15 is in common use, and Mr. Sullivan likes to say that, you can keep these firearms, you just can't buy them anymore, for example, in Colorado after this bill may be passed. Well, if the bill is passed, you essentially make a different firearm. You completely make a different firearm. If you cannot remove that magazine from the firearm itself, you've made a completely different firearm, which means it's not usual, which means it's not common, which means the long game that they're trying to play here is they're going to, make sure you can't buy these or sell them or whatever, okay? And then they're going to create this new definition of a firearm. And then when they do that, later on, they're going to be like, well, we can ban these because they're not common. They're a completely different firearm. The definition of that firearm right there is a gas-operated semi-automatic rifle capable of select fire from safe to semi-auto that accepts a detachable box magazine. If this law is passed, they essentially create a new definition. Let's call it the Colorado variant. AR-15 would be something like this: a gas-operated semi-automatic firearm capable of select fire from safe to semi-auto that has a fixed magazine. They've completely changed the definition of the firearm, which makes it not common. This is a long game that they're playing. Definitions are important. Now let's talk about Colorado Constitution. The Colorado Constitution codifies keeping and bearing arms as well. Okay, so Article 2, Section 13 of the Colorado Constitution. The right of no person to keep and bear arms in defense of his home, person, and property, or aid in the civil power when thereto legally summoned, shall be called into question. But nothing herein contained shall be construed to justify the practice of carrying concealed weapons. So what that's telling me is that keeping and bearing arms shouldn't be called into question at all. But I want you to hone in on something real quick, because we're going to go into militia service, and what it says is, or aid in the civil power when thereto legally summoned. Okay, so that goes right into the militia service. Okay, so we have the Second Amendment of the United States, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state. And then we have the Colorado Constitution saying the right of no person to keep and bear arms in the defense of his home, property, person, or the aid of civil power when thereto legally summoned shall be called into question. Okay, this is directly talking about militia service. So let's get into that real quick. So this is from the Colorado law. This is from the Colorado Constitution, as a matter of fact. I put in militia service here, or militia. And it's going to give me some things here, and we're going to look at what we're going to look at is this one right here. All right. This is Colorado Revised Statute 283103. You can look it up for yourself. We're going to go all the way down here, and we're going to look at this right here. The military forces of the state of Colorado shall be divided into two classes: the organized militia and the unorganized militia. The organized militia shall consist of the following: the federally recognized National Guard and the State Defense Force. The unorganized militia shall consist of all other members of the military forces. Okay, so you might say, okay, well, what are military forces? We're going to look at 283.1-102, and we're going to come down here to military or military forces. It refers to any or all of the state's military forces. It's kind of circular reasoning here. They're saying military forces, and then it's the state military forces. So like, that's confusing to me. But then we're going to look at state military forces. Means the National Guard of the state as defined in section 28.3.101, and any other militia or military forces organized under the laws of the state. Okay, so a little bit confusing there, but basically you have your state defense force and you have your National Guard. That's what it boils down to. Also in 28.3.101, if we look at these definitions here, you can say armed forces means Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Space Force, and Coast Guard of the United States. That's pretty plain and dry there. And then we're going to look at military forces. Includes the federally recognized National Guard and other organizations or components of the organized militia as may be created by the governor pursuant to federal or state law. Okay. And then you have your National Guard. National Guard includes the Army National Guard and the Air National Guard. So you can see there that they're making a distinction between, armed forces, National Guard, and state defense force. So when we're talking about the militia, we're talking about the organized and the unorganized. Now, there's another thing we talked about here, and we looked at the unorganized. We looked at the unorganized militia. So what does that mean exactly? What we have to do, we'll have to put state defense forces or force in the search box. Let's hit enter. Now let's look at this real quick. Person subject to military duty, state defense force. Well, we'll click on that. Now I want you guys to look at this really close, okay? Every able-bodied male citizen of Colorado and those who have declared their intention to become citizens of the United States residing therein between the ages of 18 and 64 years. So if you're a Coloradan and you're 18 to 64 years of age, you are the state defense force. Why is that important? Well, if we are the state defense force, if you fall in that category, and we can't purchase, transfer, or do anything of that nature with a semi-automatic firearm that accepts a detachable box magazine, we can't train with it. We can't do anything with it. Yes, it has a likeness to a military service rifle, such as an M4. The big difference here is that the M4 is an automatic. This is a semi-automatic. You guys get where I'm going here? If you stop the ban, if you stop the sale and transfer of these firearms, you cannot train with it. And the ones that you do train with, the life cycle is going to come up. It is absolutely backwards to what we should be doing. We should be promoting the sale and transfer and training with semi-automatic firearms in this state because we are the state defense force. It says it right there in the Constitution. It says it right there in the Colorado law. There are exemptions for the militia force or the state defense force. It literally says here, except persons exempted by law are subject to military duty in the state defense force. However, the following persons or classes of persons are exempted from military service. Members of any regularly organized fire or police department, those permanently disqualified from military service, judges, justices, clerks of the courts of records, okay, practicing physicians, all persons who, because of religious beliefs, claim exemption, okay? So there's all of those. It makes a distinction between the military services and the state defense force. And that's going to be here in 28.4.104. So it says here, the governor is authorized to organize and maintain within the state such military forces as the governor deems necessary to defend the state. Such forces are known as the State Defense Force and are comprised of such citizens of the state who volunteer or who are ordered by the governor to qualify for service therein. Such forces are additional. Additional. They're augmenting, okay, to and distinct from the National Guard. It says it right there, plain as day. They're additional and distinct to the National Guard. The Colorado State Defense Force is maintained in numbers to be determined by the governor. If organized by the governor, the Colorado State Defense Force is a Type 2 entity. I haven't gone that far into it. I need to figure out what Type 2 is, but the National Guard and the State Defense Force are both Type 2 entities, and I'm not exactly sure what that means. I haven't done all of that reading, but we can look at it at 24.1.105. No officer enlisted person of this force may be a member of the National Guard or other armed force of the United States. That's pretty clear that the State Defense Force is part of the militia, and they cannot be National Guard or part of the armed forces. Period. Why does this bill ban, even though it doesn't say ban, it's not prohibiting these firearms, quote unquote, okay? It's just stopping the sale and transfer of these firearms within the state borders. But why isn't it actually a ban? Well, you have to be able to buy them. You have to be able to get them from somewhere in order to bear and possess. The only exception for us peons that aren't law enforcement, the only exception is if we pass it on to an heir. So we can say, okay, that thing right there is an heirloom. I can pass it on to my son or something like that. That's the only exception. That doesn't make any sense to me. 0 cents. It creates an entirely different firearm, like I said, which the long game here is that you're going to create a firearm that doesn't really exist, and then you can go ahead and ban that firearm because it's not commonly possessed. I also think it's designed to prevent manufacturers from selling their firearms here because the cost of that firearm is going to go up because it's going to be a specialized firearm, you see. If Colorado is the only state that has this type of law, then those manufacturers, if you want to get a firearm as it says in this bill, that cost of that firearm is going to go up. And it's going to be coupled with the excise tax coming in April. And then also, if you want to get your CHP, your Colorado handgun permit for concealed carry, now you have to go through 8 hours of training. Then you have your storage laws. All of these laws are designed to keep the Coloradan unable to defend themselves. So in summary, I'm going to read my summary because I want to make sure I say it correctly in the way that I think it needs to be said. There's zero doubt the introduction of this bill is designed to disarm Colorado citizens. This bill, coupled with the excise tax law that goes into effect in April, the vehicle storage law, the new training law that goes into effect in July, the extreme risk protective order law, and others are catastrophic for those who can barely afford the roof over their head and who want to defend themselves with a firearm. Moreover, the Colorado General Assembly is hindering the people that would be considered the militia under the Constitution to acquire firearms capable of militia service. That's what this bill does. It makes it extremely hard to obtain a firearm that is capable of militia service. TAC out.